forget some other stuff. So good morning, everybody. It's December 29th, 2 days before the new year, or some people says two days before the end of this year. However you look at things, in my opinion, I think you need to be more positive and you need to be looking forward. So that's what we'll talk about, tomorrow. It's about how to change your mindset. Today, we're going to be focusing on closing costs, right? A review for some of you. For some of you, it may be new. For some of you, it's like, oh, I forgot about that, right? And for some, it'll be totally new. All right, so closing costs, right? Everybody has closing costs when they buy or sell, right? So we'll go over the buyer and seller net sheets, that we call it the estimated seller net proceeds. And then for a buyer, we call it the buyer's estimated closing costs, right? Now, in the old days, we used to have what we call a GFE, good faith estimate, right? So whenever a buyer borrows money from a bank, they used to get what they call a good faith estimate. Well, that changed a couple of years ago. Now they're getting what they call a loan disclosure, right? So it's just change of words. So if a loan officer has been around for a while, you can say, hey, can you give me a GFE, good faith estimate of closing costs? They know what you're talking about. If the loan officer just got in the business in like 2-3 years, they're like, huh, what's that? Right? They know lending disclosure, okay? And then, of course, at the very end of the closing statement, right, we used to have a HUD-1 statement, what they call the closing statement from the escrow company. Now, that's called a closing disclosure, right? So words changed a couple years ago, and as time changes, laws change, the words also change, but understand what they are. Now, for a seller, when you take a listing, okay, the way we train you, you're gonna, after you, I would say before you even sign the listing agreement, sometimes before or after, it doesn't matter. But bottom line is, before you leave that appointment, we train you guys to create an estimated cost or estimated seller net proceeds. Basically, when you sell the property, what is the estimated net to the seller, right? What are those numbers? That way, when it comes to receiving an offer, you can redo it based on the offer. And then at the end of the day, or at the end of closing, or when it closes, or when they sign their final docs, they're not surprised like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to pay for that. Oh, I didn't know your commission was that much, right? I remember, I shared this story with you guys before. One of my clients, or some of my clients, thought that the commission was based on their net proceeds, what they get, right? Some of them, thought it was a higher percentage. Some thought it was a lower percentage. Bottom line is, they need to know what they're dealing with, right? So by the end of today, hopefully you guys will have the template, the minimum closing costs that I suggest you guys have when you do your closing costs. And hopefully by the end of today also, you'll know how to fill it out. Very easy, okay? All right, before we move forward with we'll do the seller one first, okay? Because that's the easy one, okay? So I'm gonna share my screen and hopefully it will work, okay? So hang on there. By the way, does anybody have any specific question that they have while I'm pulling up my zip forms? Anything specific you guys wanna talk about today? Or that you guys came on the call, because some of you guys haven't seen for a couple of days, couple of weeks, some couple of months, right? So anything specific?
Well, I had a quick question. So on, is the closing cost for a buyer different on a probate sale versus a regular purchase, or is it the same?
The closing costs are pretty much the same. The only difference is what the fees of the attorney and the probate is, right? So that's a great question, Max. So I'll make sure I'll cover that. Okay. So anything else? You guys got 30 seconds? Yes. Who's that? Dolly?
Yes,
Aurora. Question.
Yeah. No. I was trying to check the YouTube last night to see disclosures training, but it wasn't there yet. How?
Okay. Oh, last night? Yeah, I didn't get a chance to upload yesterday's class, so I'll make sure I upload both of these classes today.
No, and the disclosures too. I know you already.
Oh, okay. So let's take a look, right? Let's take a look. Okay, so great thought. Okay, so let me make sure you guys know how to get to our YouTube channel, right? Okay, all right. So let's do this. Let me share my screen. Okay, all right. So, okay, all right. So our YouTube channel, right? You guys can see YouTube. right? So you would go to youtube.com, right? Usually that's the website, right? Correct? You guys see YouTube, Max?
Yes.
Aurora? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay. All right. So our YouTube channel, what's our page? So you go to search, right? What's the name? Team, right? Intero East Bay, right? One word, right? Because if you put spaces in between, you're going to go to a different website. So Team Intero East Bay, got it? You do a search, and here's the page, right? So when we look at it, you know, here are the most recent ones, usually from the top. So you can see Aurora on the second one.
Yeah, I saw it now. It
Right?
wasn't there last night.
Oh, it was there. It was there, right? So yeah, so you can sort it, right? But it's there. So if you go to the home page, right? You know, oops.
It wasn't there last night.
I don't know. It's here. So I'm not sure what happened if it wasn't there. So if you scroll down, there's some older ones, right? And then there's some other stuff that that are similar, but it's there. All the training we've had the past 2 weeks, it's there. Okay, except for last night and today. So today and tomorrow and yesterday will be uploaded. Sometime this week. Okay, if not later today. All right. So that's what that is. Okay. So now let me take a look at zip forms, right? All right, so let's see. Make sure you guys can see this. Let me pull up zip forms now. Okay, you guys see zip forms, correct? Yes? Head nod, Max, perfect. Okay. All right, so we all know how to use the cover sheet and all that stuff. So we're gonna go into the seller's estimated proceeds, right? So how to find it, right? So I'm gonna go to my, let's see. Let's not, okay, I'm not gonna go to my template, so I'm just gonna do my transactions, right? So remember we talked about templates before. So if you don't know the name of the word, just put, proceed, right? Right? There's the estimated seller proceed, right? If you don't know, you just put seller, right? And then you can use, you can try to find out what it is, right? But again, seller has a lot of different forms. So my suggestion is put proceed, right? Right? So it says proceed, okay, right? Because if you put net, it's not gonna find it, all right? So that's what it is, okay? So let's grab the form. Oops, you didn't grab.
Hey, Greg, one question.
Yes, question?
If I type in proceed, shouldn't it show up the buyer, seller?
No, because the buyer is called the estimated buyer closing cost, EBC,
okay.
right?
Okay.
The seller is estimated ESP, right?
Got it. Okay.
Right. So they call it differently, right? So that way it's easy for you supposedly to find it, right? Where did you go? Estimated buyer. There it is. Oh, it's the bottom. Yeah. All right. So here's the estimated seller proceeds, right? I'm not sure if you guys can see this, right? Oops. Okay. Let me do full. Okay, here's the full screen, right? As you can see, this is all blank, right? Right? Okay, right? This is blank. Well, remember, now I'm gonna go to my template, right? Because remember, we created a template, right? We did a listing contract template before, right? Right? On the template, you have the cover sheet, the listing agreement, and the estimated seller proceeds. Estimated seller proceeds. There are numbers here that you guys should be able to see. All right. So like I said, you guys will have this recording hopefully before 1 o'clock this afternoon, right? It'll be on our YouTube channel, okay? But if you want to, take a picture, you can. So remember, these are the closing costs. We're gonna show you how to complete this. For now, there are at least, how many numbers? 6, right? 6 things that you need to have. 250 is called a reconveyance or demand fee, right? What is that? This is a fee typically charged by the lien holders. You guys can see this, right? The estimated seller proceeds, yes? Right? So lien holders, who are these? The seller's lender. Typically, the lender will charge them some fee to give them a demand, a final payoff, and also a reconveyance fee, basically to release the interest on the property, okay? And that typically is around $250 per loan. So if there's a second loan, there may or may not be another fee, But usually I tell you guys to put charge here $250 per loan. So remember that, okay? But for now, just put $250 because we're assuming there's only one loan. If you find out there's a second loan, then you can double it. If not, there's also a catch-all later on, and I'll show you. The next fee is this escrow and title charges. Most title company will charge like a flat fee to do the paperwork, drawing, notary, and recording fees, to record the documents, to hire a notary, to draw the loan, to draw the escrow instructions. That's what that is, right? Should say preparation of docs, but they call it drawing, and it's never been changed. I'm not sure why it's not. The old days that someone had to handwrite these documents. That's why it says drawing. Okay, but it should say prep documents, right? But the prep documents, that's what the escrow fee is technically is for. Okay, escrow fee, right? So it's kind of separated. Now we don't know who's paying for the escrow and title, right? Until we received an offer, right? For now, it's not there. That's why it's not part of our template. So our template is $250 and $300 per transaction. It's not per loan, it's per transaction, okay? $250 per loan, right? Of the seller, okay? However many loan seller has. Now, I put here listing, right? 6%. It will calculate depending on what price or what list price I put on the top, okay? On the proposed sale price, okay? So that's going to depend on my listing, right? Well, now, when I get an offer, it's going to adjust depending on the sales price, right? Or if you choose to lower your commission. Although when I go on appointment, this is pre-printed 6%, and it has that amount. I don't separate the amount yet, okay? I just tell them it's 6%. That's standard, right? Okay. County transfer tax usually paid by seller, $1.10 per thousand, okay? It will calculate it based on sales price. Got it? NHD, natural hazard disclosure, right? This is JCP, disclosure source, things like that. $130, right? Sometimes it's cheaper than that, $99 or whatever, right? One time it was $79, right? This is the full NHD report, $130. I put here home warranty, $600, okay? On the next class next year, in January, next month, we're gonna change this to probably $650, okay? Again, we wanna have these numbers a little bit higher than normal. That way the seller's not shocked, oh, I didn't get every dollar. And again, remember, these are just estimates, 600. Okay, this miscellaneous, 750, right? So remember, if you didn't put 250 per loan on the top, this will give a padding, okay? Some clients of mine, I said, what's that miscellaneous? And the way I explain it is that, hey, Mr. Seller, sometimes there are things that, unforeseen. Maybe we need to Federal Express some documents, or there's extra documents that needs to be recorded or prepared. So sometimes, I want to make sure that you are, worst case, what you're looking at, Mr. Seller, okay? I've never had a seller come up with less money based on what I give them on estimates on this form, because I always show them, the worst case. So you guys got those numbers? 250, 300, 130, 600, and 750, right? So these are the 5 on this side and then 2 on the left side. Okay, got it? Okay, so you guys should have that by now, right? 250, 300, 130, 600, 750 equals 2030. Those are the 6 numbers. 2030 is the minimum, right? 2030. 6%, $1.10 on the left side. Now, how do you use this form is the next question. All right, so so I have this as my template. So again, templates, you don't change, right? This is already there. Now, we don't know what are the closing costs, right? Now, you can see here, there are some HOA transfer, move out fees, right? Remember, there are sometimes there's HOA preparation fees, right? So that's where I would put that, if you're selling like a condo or something, I would probably put there, as a standard, at least 750 minimum, right? Or even I just rounded up to 800. The way I teach you guys, I like to have these numbers different. So that was easy to remember, right? So in this case, the HOA transfer fee, these are getting higher and higher, right? So for now, on the next class, right, I would tell you guys just to put, $800, right? For all of this, because sometimes this gets to, I've seen one is $1,500, okay? And I tell them, this will depend on what the HOA will charge you. We don't know what that is because that fluctuates, okay? But sometimes by the time I receive an offer, I would have already ordered the HOA docs. I would know these numbers. Why? Because there would be like an HOA demand already or an HOA cert, something like that, okay? That I will know what these fees are, right? And then by then I would have ordered the home warranty, so you would know what that is, right? If there's any pest report or property inspection report or roof report, this is where you would put it, right? The wood destroying, and then of course repairs, right? So again, as an agent, your job is to know what the cost of selling of a house is, right? So minimum are these fees, right? Everything else is going to depend on, is there a credit to the buyer that we're doing, right? Is there repairs, things like that. So please know how to complete this form, okay? It's very easy to do. Just remember these 7 numbers, right? 7 or 8, however you want to look at it, okay? But there's 250 per loan, 300 per escrow, right? 6% commission, $1.10 per thousand for the city, or sorry, county. Remember, if there's a city transfer tax, you have to put that in, right? If you're selling in San Leandro, San Jose, Oakland, Berkeley, San Francisco, right? There are some other cities. You should know how much that is, okay? All right, so when I go on an appointment, what do I do? Usually, I would put a sales price, right? So in this case, you complete the top, you put a sales price of, $1 million, right? We're going to use that as our number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So that's the $1 million, right? It's the proposed list price. So now, if you know the closing date, this is not really critical, although, for this case, we're going to use end of February, okay? We're just going to use February 25th as our estimated closing date. You put whatever date you want to put, typically 2 to 3 months later from the time you list the house or when you get the offer, you should know what that is, okay? Current annual property tax, you can get this from the property tax bill or the public or the property tax report. In this case, we're just going to say they pay about $6,000 a year, okay? Right? Now the tax rate, okay, there's also a percentage on the tax record. So hopefully you guys know how to do this, okay? In this case, I'm just going to put the Union City one. So or the standard one, we used to put 1.25, right? But again, some areas it's higher, okay? So you should know what that tax rate is. Again, it's not critical for you to put anything here, okay? If you don't put anything there, no big deal, okay? Because that goes into proration, right? So what else do I tell you guys to do? I ask you guys to ask the seller, how much do you owe on your house, right? So on the first loan, they say, oh, I still owe, 400,000, right? I said, as of what date was that, right? So usually they'll give me because one of the things I ask the seller is, hey, when I come over to come see your house tomorrow, before we put the home on the market, can you please have a couple things for me? Number one, I want a copy of your latest mortgage statement, okay? If you have 1 or 2 loans, please have them ready. If you have a copy of your property tax bill, that would be great. And also, I need a set of keys, okay? So those are 3 things I ask a seller to prepare for my appointment, okay? So that way they're ready to put the home on the market, right? Set of keys, copy of their tax bill, copy of their mortgages. If they don't have any of those, which more than half the time, sellers, they have either some or none of those 3 things, right? I can deal with it when I get there. I can get their property tax bill online, right? By having the property tax report. The mortgage statement, I'll just use whatever's online, okay? If they don't have that number. But usually seller will have a number, okay? So I will use that whatever number they have. The second thing I will do is on the other, I always tell them, hey, 2 times their PITI, right? Or their payment. Why? Because again, in real estate, you pay after, right? So you pay after the month is over. So I always want to pad their numbers. So I will deduct, right, from their net proceeds 2 months payment, right? So I ask them, hey, by the way, how much do you pay every month, right? They'll just give me a number, right? So they'll just say 2,500, right? So, oops, all right. So that's 2 times PITI at 2,500, right? So now now I have to type in 5,000, right? Okay, so that you have to do. Now, if you don't have any of these numbers, you can fill out this form by hand at the appointment, right? So once I have these numbers, then I'm okay. So now I go on the appointment. I say, okay, great. So now I just double check everything. Is there, escrow fees, things like that? 1 loan, right? Are they paying the title and escrow fees, right? If you're in San Jose, that may be normal. But see, I don't know that until we get the offer, right? Other than that, there's really nothing else for me to complete. I print this out, or I could email them together with my pre-listing package, and they should know what they're going to net, right? So their closing cost is 63,000, right? Roughly. Okay. So if you don't have this form, if you have those free title company apps, okay, they have these estimated seller proceeds and buyer closing costs apps on their phone, right? That you can get. So contact your favorite title company rep, and they will get you these apps for free, right? Like Fidelity Agent, Chicago Agent, right? There's several of them that's out there. Now, completing this should be very easy. If for some reason you're at a party, right? Someone asks, hey, Max, how much does it cost to sell a house? Well, typically, what price do you want to sell the house for, right? So I talk about that, right? Now, usually I don't, discuss numbers during a party. I'll say, well, that may depend, tell me, why are you selling, right? I ask more questions before I give them the actual number. If they press me, right? How much is my closing cost? The way you figure that out is going to be 1% times or plus your commission. So whatever commission you're going to charge is 1%, is the closing cost, plus is approximately I tell them it's approximately, I do the math in my head, right? So I take, whatever sales price, $1 million, 7%, 1% closing cost plus 7%. So I tell them it's probably around $70,000 to sell your house, right? Again, you can give them a ballpark number. You can give them a range. It's up to you. I say, well, it's probably going to be about $70,000, but that's going to depend on after I see your house. When do you want me to come over and take a look at your property? Right? You got to close for the appointment, right? So again, you can ask all these questions, at the party, or say, hey, sounds like, you have a lot of questions about the possible sale of your home. When would be a good time for us to discuss your plans, Max? Follow up, right? So, because sometimes the party is not the place, but sometimes the party is a good place because people can overhear it, and then maybe some other conversations will happen, right? So, any questions on how to complete this form? Very easy, right? Yes? Okay. All right. Now let's go to
Greg, just a quick question. And if you scroll up on this form, scroll down basically.
Yeah.
So there's wood destroying pest and corrective work and so many other things. When are those really used? Are they really used? Or,
remember, when I take the listing, I don't know what this is, right? When I get usually when I get an offer, I will redo this based on our information.
Okay.
Let's say we get some work done. I will redo it based on that. Okay. So I update as often as there's any changes.
Okay.
Like let's say on the appointment, we thought it was 400, right? The loan amount. But then they show me a statement that says, oh, it's only 250, right? Because they didn't have that number on the pre-qualification call. Then I will change it and I will email you the updated one, right? Okay. And I tell them, okay, so if all the numbers are accurate, Mr. Max, at the end of the day, when we're all done, this is your estimated seller proceeds at the bottom. Right? Worst case, this is what you're looking at. Is that enough for you to get to your next house? Yes or no? Right? So again, they're gonna say yes or no, or objections will come out at this point. Most of the time, it's no big deal because we've already discussed our commission before. We already talked about the price and everything else. So usually I use this form as at the end, or sometimes I use it as a way to close for the listing appointment. Okay. However you want to use it, it's up to you. Sometimes I do it in the beginning, sometimes middle, sometimes at the end. Okay. And again, when do I usually do it? At the time of listing, at the time we get offers, and maybe when we get repairs or things change around the contract. Okay. So I usually have several of them. Now, someone asked me before, how do you know about the sales price? Well, usually I would have asked them at the pre-qual call. It's like, hey, Aurora, what price do you think you're comfortable putting the home in the market at? They'll give me a price. And usually I would ask them, how did you arrive at that price, right? So sometimes we'll talk about the price during the pre-qualification already, or at least I'll know how they arrived at their price. So that way I'm not surprised when they, when we go on the appointment. Okay, fair enough. All right. So the next one is, let's talk about the buyer one, right? So with the buyer, okay. So here's the estimated, have it here. Yeah. So let me get it from the. Yeah. So on the buyer residential purchase, okay. So there are different numbers on this one, okay. So on the estimated buyer, Right? You guys see this, right? Estimated buyer cost. Yes, perfect. Okay. So what are the standard, right? And we'll piggyback on this call tomorrow when I have Ritu on the call. Okay. So typically, what does a lender charge, right? There's usually some sort of processing underwriting fees of roughly about $9.95, right? Now, that could depend on the size of the loan, right? But usually for estimating, I use that $9.95, right? Appraisal fees, $7.50, right? So we're gonna confirm that with Ritu tomorrow, okay? Now, as an agent, our job is to know what escrow charges, what inspections or repairs needs to be done, what are the different closing costs. We need to also know what the escrow fees are. And how do we know that? We have to make calls to the title company and also to your loan officer, so you know. Now, the loan officer would have given them some sort of lending disclosure, either before or after they even make the offer, or at least give them an idea what the closing costs are. Your job is to get a copy of that so you can create this, right? Because the loan officer only knows from a lending perspective what the closing costs are. Some of them are pretty good because they will call escrow to give them, to get their fees, okay? Some of them will even ask, hey, what are, is there any inspections that you think the buyer's going to get, right? So usually that's done, right? But of course, in this market, most of the time the seller pays for the inspection fees, right, in the beginning. But sometimes the buyer will order, let's say, a fireplace inspection or a foundation inspection or something. You can add that in here. Again, this is between you and the buyer, okay? This doesn't go to the lender typically. All right, so $9.95 underwriting processing fee per loan. Appraisal fee, $7.50 per loan, right? Sometimes there's a second loan, there might be a second appraisal, okay? Other lender fees, I just put here approximately $250, right? This is the tax service, flood cert, sometimes the HOA cert is part of it, right? So put that, okay? The drawing doc prep, remember the 300 from from the seller? It's here also, right? Now, again, escrow fee, lender's fees, right? That all depends on what those costs are, right? So you have to call your loan officer what those are, right? Remember, the loan officer would know this because they should have called the escrow company. If not, you need to confirm it because the lender or loan officer may have some approximates. Okay, as an agent, you want to confirm what that number is if it's even close. If they're using a higher number, use that. Okay, if they're using a lower number, you don't want to use that because that will affect your buyer. Because if they're short on cash later, they're gonna say, "Hey, you told me, Max, this is what my closing costs are." Right? Okay, so you need to know what that number are because this is a big number. Now, county transfer tax, right? Oops, where is that? Okay, so it's not here. Okay, all right. City transfer tax, right? Here we go. The city transfer tax here, paid by the buyer, right? Now, seller county transfer tax, $1.10 is usually paid by the seller, right? The standard. Now, there is a city transfer tax that's usually split 50-50. So you need to know what that is, okay? So typically you'll have a number here, right? Okay, so whatever that transfer tax is. Now, the transfer tax you have to calculate, okay? So let's say you're selling one in Oakland. It's $15 per thousand and it's typically split 50-50. So that's like $7.50 per thousand. So on $1 million, that's $7,500, right? So that could be $7,500 here. Okay, now, oops, sorry, not 7,500 per thousand. It's 750 per thousand, right? Okay, so let's say what that is, right? In most cases, though, it would be zero. So I'm just gonna leave this as blank. Okay, so you need to know what that number is. Okay, are you charging any brokerage fee? Like if you're using a buyer brokerage fee, right? Annual insurance, I use $1,000. Understand that if there's flood insurance required, earthquake insurance, or wildfire insurance, you need to know what that number is so you can adjust it, okay? And again, you explain to them, this is just a rough estimate. Once you know your insurance requirements, because again, they can buy a higher cost insurance because they have valuables in the house or something. So this could be higher. Pest inspection, $275, physical inspection, $675. If there are other fees here, you can add it, right? HOA transfer fee, again, if there's an HOA, we put $800, right? As a standard, okay? We're not going to change that for buyer or seller. Again, if it's less, then they get their money back, okay? Miscellaneous, again, $750, right? So for a buyer, it's typically $49.95 as a starting point. Okay, that's the minimum. Now, if you're in a party again, Margaret asked me, hey, Greg, how much would it cost to buy a house in today's market? The number is 2% of the sales price multiplied by the sales price, right? Now, if they have points is what they call loan origination. Like at 3%, 0 points. 2.5%, it's 2 points, right? So the 2 points equals to 2% of the loan. Most of the time, it's 0 points. Everybody goes for 0 points, right? Tomorrow, Ritu, I asked her, to get me some examples because, for instance, sometimes you can pay points and it lowers your interest rate. So what you're doing is you're prepaying the interest, right? Sometimes it makes sense to pay points, okay? Because when you pay points, you lower the interest rate. What you have to do is figure out how long do you plan to keep the loan, not the house, but the loan, right? So if Max is planning to retire in 10 years, right? He wants his house paid off. He's going to use the 10-year rule, right? He wants to pay it off in 10 years. So even though he has a 30-year mortgage, he can pay off that loan in 10 years if he does the math properly. In one of my classes, we talk about how to pay off your mortgage in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years with a 30-year mortgage, basically by changing the amortization schedule, right? So for instance, Max can get a 30-year mortgage at 3.5 today, but if he pays 2 points, he can get 3%, right? So what is, so he can pay 3% of $1 million, or sorry, 2% of $1 million. So that's $20,000 he has to prepay, right? But what is the payment difference between 3.5% and 3%, right? So that's where you have to do the math. Usually I tell my clients, if you're going to keep this loan for like 3 to 5 years, and that's the cost of paying down the loan and the price difference, you may want to pay the points, okay? So tomorrow, we'll touch on that a little bit, but yeah, we'll have a specific class for that, next year again. So that way you understand what it means by paying points, okay? If you have more questions about that, I'll try to answer it at the end of this call. So that way, you have some clarity in case I don't see you until next year, right? All right. So how do you complete this? Remember, 2% is what as in a party, it's 2%, right? That's what I use. For a seller, it's 1% plus my commission, right? So 2% plus points. In this case, it's 0 points. So, so if they're buying $1 million, I tell them, oh, your closing costs will probably be roughly somewhere around, 15 to 20,000, depending if you pay any points, right? Why do I use 15 to 20? Because I know it's probably going to be less than 20, right? So I'm not going to shock them with 20, but that's the worst case, right? Okay. But typically it's around 15 to 20,000. Now it could be a lot less, because the lender doesn't charge a lot, or there's some rebates you can get. Okay. But again, I'm at a party, I use that number. Okay. All right. So how do you complete this? On the top, you complete, the information up top as you know it, right? But it's not critical, right? The most important thing you have to do is right here. What are the costs from the lending perspective, right? So in this case, let's pretend this is all there is, right? That's fine, right? Escrow fees, you need to find out, who's paying for it. In most of my offers, I have the buyer paying for the escrow fee, the lender, title insurance, and the owner's title policy. That's why there's 3 of them here. Sometimes there's an sub-escrow fee, okay? Some lenders will, or some escrow company will charge that now. So you need to find that out. So I would call my escrow company. I'll say, hey, Ronnie, what's the fees for this property, right? Or for this sales price? Most title company will have it online or on their app. So you'll know how that is, right? So next year we'll have an escrow company talk about their app so you can have a breakdown on how to use it, okay? So you guys should know how to use it, very easy. Now, the next thing is property taxes. Again, it's not critical to know what that is, right? Because we're gonna assume right now, everybody is paying their taxes on their own. The seller paid their taxes on time, right? So I don't worry about prorations, okay? Now, we'll talk more about that in detail once we're done here. So I'll answer some questions on that, okay? After that, remember, city transfer tax, is there any? Did the insurance change? Are there inspection fees that's gonna be more expensive, right? You can bundle this into one if that's what you want to do. Like sometimes I just use 1,200 as a total, right? Some people are a little bit more details, like, hey, what is that, right? So after we're done here, completing this left-hand side should be very easy, right? Now, the challenges is on the right hand side. Just like, with the seller is always on the right-hand side, okay? So prorated taxes, right? Remember, the seller has paid their taxes. So for instance, right? Remember, we're gonna close April, right? Okay. So, I mean, sorry, end of February, right? So on the projected closing date, we're gonna use, the February 25th, right? The end of the month, right? Now, what's the loan amount? You should know what that is, right? So we're just gonna use, 750, right? Is their loan amount, right? Is it a fixed? Good, 30-year term. Again, it's not going to do calculations, but what it will do is it will, you'll just have some numbers. Now, annual property taxes, right? So if you know what that is, and then the rate, right? If you don't know it, don't worry about it, okay? So, yet, for instance, like prorated taxes, right? If you don't have anything here, it's no big deal. Don't worry about it, right? But usually, okay, I will have, the prorations. What I mean by that is, remember, we're closing end of February. So that means the seller or the seller may have paid their taxes for the second half already, right? From January to June. So the buyer may have to pay the 4 months between February 25th till the end of June 30, right? Because that's the calendar tax year, okay? That's the second half. So usually I would, I always tell the agents, find out what that rate is or what the tax is, right? And then here, if I always say, always put 180, okay, which is 6 months, right? Then, so let's say the tax rate is 1.25, right? Okay, projected sales price is $1 million, right? Okay. So the current annual tax bill is, let's say it's, what did we say earlier? 6,000, I thought, right? 6,000, okay. Okay, so you have the proration here. It does 3,000, right? But remember, what is the tax bill going to be about, right? It's going to be multiplied by the sales price, okay, technically. Okay, so you may have to make some adjustments here, but for now, the escrow company will only collect what is due, okay? So this is a good conversation for your buyer that they're going to be receiving what they call a supplemental tax bill for the balance, because their tax bill is 1.25, whatever the rate is, multiplied by the sales price. The 6,000 is based on the owner's tax bill, which is lower because they bought the house for a lower price typically, right? So sometimes I would put here, like, supplemental tax, right? Subtax, right? And, I would put, 1.25 of $1 million is 12,005 divided by 2, so 6,250, right? So you're already collecting 6,000, so there might be an additional, let's say, 3,250, right? Or 3,125, sorry, right? Right? So I would put here 3,125, right? Okay, so they're prepared for it because that's what their tax bill should be, okay? Right, which is half the year, okay? So if you look at it, purchase price, 1 million, loan amount, 750, down payment is 250, estimated expenses, we're just using 49.95. That's lower than the 2%, remember? But again, it depends on who's paying for escrow fees and title, okay? So it could be that low, but typically it's higher, right? So look, we're just gonna put here, let's say the escrow fee for $1 million, I think it's around 1,200 probably. Title insurance is probably owner's title policy, which is typically higher, so we're just gonna use 1,500. Lender's policy, we're just gonna use 2,000, right? So, okay. So you can see it adjusts the estimated expenses to 9,600, okay? Okay, the credits, okay, so what is the credits, right? So the credits is, is this, they got it from here, right? So the credits, okay? So typically, like I said earlier, I don't like to put anything here, but for now, we put something there here, you should remove this, right? Because I don't want to, this is not the conversation usually before we write an offer, okay? In this case, we usually don't put anything on credits, okay? So I tell them, okay, so to buy this house, you're gonna need around $260,000, okay? Estimated cash needed to close, okay? 3% of that is gonna go towards your EMD, right? Which we applied towards your down payment, okay? So any questions? Usually I would ask them and they will ask away. So do you guys, any questions on the buyer's estimated cost? I went pretty fast. So when you watch the video later, you can review it and get those numbers together again. So any questions at all? So no. So you guys, as a buyer agent, you know how to estimate your closing costs. As a listing agent, for instance, Salik went on listing appointment yesterday. Hopefully he, if the seller did ask, for an estimated closing cost or how much it costs to sell the house, he would have known how to complete it. If not, he'll definitely do it next time on his appointment, right? So anybody else need any help on the closing costs for buyer or seller? No? Oh, you guys are quiet. Okay. So I'm
The
assuming
question I had was on the probate thing, if you have any.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks for reminding me. Okay. So Max asked about, the probate, right? What is the closing cost on a probate, right? So I'm just going to pull up, estimated seller proceeds on this form. Okay. So we have the estimated seller proceed, right? So what are the costs, right? So typically, oops, what happened? Lost it. Okay, try again. Okay, so typically on a probate, right? So let me get the form out so you guys can see it. Okay, estimated seller proceeds, right? So as you can see here, there's nothing here that says about probate, right? Right. So from a listing agent standpoint, you don't really get involved in the cost of probate, right?
Greg, your screen is blank.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Max.
Yeah.
See, it's good to speak up, right? So when the presenter is talking about something, make sure that they know that it is blank. Thank you, Max. All right. So here are the closing costs that we did earlier, right? Okay. Right. So here it is. So as you can see here, there's nothing here that says probate, right? Nothing about probate fees, right? Now there's a blank line here at the bottom, right? So as a listing agent, when I've done probate, typically there's nothing I need to do differently here, right? Because what I'm doing here is cost of when I sell the house, right? Now the trustee or the administrator will have different probate fees, right? So what is the cost of probate typically, right? That's going to be handled with the lawyer, right? You don't need to put anything on this sheet, okay? Yet to educate yourself, what is the cost of probate? Typically, it's about 10% of the estate, okay? It's a sliding scale. After I think 100,000, it drops a little bit, right? And after $1 million, it drops a little bit more, right? It becomes like 5% after like $1 million, I believe. So, but from a probate perspective, the cost of probate is roughly about 10% of the estate, okay? This is not the estate. So for us as agents, we don't have to put anything into account in here, right? So if they ask me, hey, what is the cost of probate, Greg? I said, that's something that you need to discuss with your lawyer. Do you have a probate lawyer yet? Right? And typically they already have. So I would refer that questions to them, okay? I would want to get that probate lawyer's information, and I would probably CC both of them for that question. Hey, Mike, the trustee had a question regarding probate fees. What are those? But typically the probate lawyer would have done that in the beginning of their transaction, okay? The moment, they start the probate process, they would have been told about their fees, okay? Because that's what happened when, with my dad, okay? We went through probate and, something that we knew at the beginning, okay? So it's a very simple process. With a probate, you just have to figure out, does the trustee have an independent administratorship, which means do anything that they want? Or does he have to go through the court system for approval, which means that you need court confirmation? What that means is the court is the one making decisions on behalf of the estate. Typically, that happens when there's no trustee that they can be determined, or there's no heirs or something like that, okay? Where the court is acting on behalf of the estate, okay?
On a buyer's side, there's no difference then, right?
No, from a buyer, there's no difference, right?
Okay.
Except for, does it need court confirmation or not? Okay.
Got it.
If you need court confirmation, there's a possibility that the buyer may be outbidded at the confirmation, or the court can reject the offer. Okay.
Got it. Got it.
All right. So probate, very easy. Trustee sales, same thing, right? No additional cost that we need to put in this form for the seller and also for the buyer. Okay. All right. So any more questions on what we've covered so far the past 2 weeks, or anything at all throughout 2021 that you guys have a question about that you've been wanting to get me to answer, right? But anything in general. So before we wrap up, I'll just open up the floor to anybody have anything to share or ask about anything.
Hi, Greg.
Yes, Ali.
I have a question about the buyer's closing costs.
Yes.
How do you find out the property tax rate in an area?
The property tax rate, you're gonna pull the property tax report, from the MLS, okay? And it will have the tax rate on there, right? It will have an effective tax rate, okay? So that's just for an estimate, because that changes from year to year, depending on what is voted on or added on by the city or the municipalities, okay? So the effective tax rate is on there, okay? So for that, for instance, like that property in Oakland that you went on appointment on, by the way, did you take the listing or did you turn them down?
So not all the decision makers were there.
Okay.
So basically I think his like brother is sick, so he was like somewhere else.
Okay.
So I think I sent him over a copy of the listing agreement.
Right.
So
Perfect.
I think it's just staying in touch with them and hopefully get it in the next few
Great.
days.
Okay. So pull up the tax record on the MLS for that property, and you will get an effective tax rate. Take a look at it. Okay. If you don't see it, text me later and we'll reconnect. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
And that goes for anybody. So if you pull up your house address on the MLS, guys, and pull up your tax record, and you'll see an effective tax rate or your tax bill, the most recent one. If not, go to the let's say Alameda County Tax Assessor Office, and you can pull up your tax bill there. It won't technically have an effective tax rate because those are flat fees, so it won't calculate for you. But I believe on the MLS tax report, it does do a blended rate for you. Okay, because the rates can be different. Like in Union City, it's 1.21. Newark, it's like 1.201 or 205. Okay, Fremont is, I think it's 122 now, 0.122. So it's less than one, the 1.25%. In San Ramon, it could be as high as 1.86. Okay, I had one in Mountain House. It was like 2.3% of the sales price because there are Mellorews or other things added on, okay, to the tax bill, right? And sometimes they'll have like hero or pace loans added to it. So again, the tax rate, you have to make sure you show. That's why on the NHD, there's what they call a property tax calculator in there, okay, which will help you complete it. So next time you guys have an NHD report, take a look at it, and there will be a sample of a property tax calculator in there. Okay, so good thing to ask or to look at is the tax bill. Okay, so great question. So anything else? Have anybody have any specific questions, comments before we wrap up today's call? Oh, you guys are good. I tend to speak fast, right? So that way I can get a lot of the information out. So that's why I record it so you guys can listen to it on your own. All right. Okay. So if nothing else, I would say have a great rest of your afternoon, morning, and we will see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. as we talk more about a mortgage update, a market update, business planning, a little bit, right? This is not a full business planning class, right? I'm just going to give you guys ideas on how to create a better business plan, or at least how to set better goals or exciting goals, right? What are you going to do with the money that you're going to earn, right? Like, do you plan to buy a rental property next year, right? If not, what do you plan to buy with your money? Put it in the bank? That's okay too. Yeah, that's exciting for some, right? Seeing your bank account grow, right? But understand this, right? Something needs to light up your fire every day, right? Something needs to get you going out of bed every morning. Something needs to keep you going throughout the day and throughout the year or throughout your career, right? So again, we are in an exciting times. We have an exciting business, right? So be excited about it and just understand, if this is not exciting you, go find something that will, right? So life is to be lived, right? Like we and Max were talking about earlier, right?
Yeah.
Life is to be lived. All right. Any other questions, comments before I end the call then? or I'll stick around for a few seconds, few minutes for the shy people to ask their questions. All right. So I'm gonna. Anything else? Okay. So I'm gonna